I thought I found peace in Pattaya. I gave her my last chance at love. We got married on the beach. I thought it meant something. 2 weeks later, she vanished, and so did everything in my name. Now, I sit here wondering if any of it was real or just a setup from the start. A few days ago, I got an email from a longtime viewer of this channel. He told me he's been watching since the early stories, just sitting quietly, listening. He wrote, "I used to think these things only happened to other guys, until it happened to me, and I didn't even see it coming." Reading that brought something heavy up in me. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even sad exactly. It was something else, that quiet, sinking feeling when you realize how many of us carry the same pain. Different names, different places, but the same ending. I just sat there, phone in hand, staring at the message for a long time. Because his words made me feel less alone and reminded me why I started telling these stories in the first place. If you're watching this, and if any part of this hits a nerve, I'd be grateful if you'd hit the like button, drop a comment, and tell me where you're watching from. I read every single one. And if you're one of the people who keeps coming back to this channel video after video, thank you, truly. Your support means more than I can say. You've made this more than just a channel. You've made it a place where stories like mine and yours actually matter. So wherever you are tonight, if you've ever put your heart on the line and got silence in return, you're not alone. Let me take you back to where it all started. The sand was still warm under my feet when the monk finished his blessing. "You are now husband and wife," he said in broken English, smiling at both of us. Anong looked up at me with those dark eyes that had captured me 6 months earlier, her white dress flowing in the Jomtien breeze. "I love you, Leonard," she whispered, her voice soft against the sound of the waves. I believed every word. At 67, after 30 years of marriage that ended in bitter divorce, after 2 years of loneliness in Manchester, I thought I'd never feel this again. But here she was, 32, beautiful, holding my weathered hands like they were precious. "I love you too, darling," I said, my voice catching. The small crowd of friends clapped as we kissed. Her hotel colleagues from the Pattaya Princess threw flower petals. Even the British expats I'd met at the pub seemed genuinely happy for us. I felt like I belonged somewhere again. That night, in our small rented room overlooking the beach, she traced circles on my chest. "I never thought I would marry Farang," she said quietly. "But you, different. You listen to me. You see me." I kissed her forehead. "You're my second chance, Anong. Maybe my last chance." She smiled in the darkness. "Not last chance. First chance for real love." I wanted to believe her so desperately. Looking back, I think that desperation was the first crack in my armor. But that night, wrapped in her arms, listening to the ocean outside our window, I felt like the luckiest man alive. We'd only been together 6 months, but it felt right. She didn't care that I was old enough to be her father. She said age was just a number. She loved how I treated her with respect, how I listened to her dreams of maybe visiting England someday. "Most men here just want one night," she'd told me early on. "You want to know my heart." That was the man I tried to be for her, the man I thought she needed. 3 weeks after the wedding, we found a house just outside central Pattaya. Nothing fancy, 2 bedrooms, a small kitchen, a garden where Anong could grow her herbs. "It's perfect," she said, walking through the empty rooms. "We can make it home." I paid the deposit that afternoon, 12 months up front. The landlady, a stern Thai woman in her 60s, looked at me with knowing eyes. "Many Farang rent here," she said. "Some stay long time, some—" She shrugged. I didn't understand the warning then. I was too busy watching Anong measure windows for curtains. She transformed that place in weeks. Buddhist statues in the corner, her clothes mixed with mine in the wardrobe, the smell of pad thai drifting from the kitchen every evening. I'd come home from my afternoon walks around town to find her mopping floors, humming Thai songs I didn't recognize. "You work too hard," I'd tell her, We should hire someone. She'd shake her head. I take care of my husband. That's what wife does. It felt too good to be true, but I pushed that thought away. I wanted her to feel secure, so I opened a second account at Bangkok Bank and added her name. For emergencies, I explained. In case something happens to me. Her eyes filled with tears. Nothing will happen to you, she said, throwing her arms around me. We have long life together. A month later, her younger brother Somchai appeared at our door with a broken moped. Can you help? Anong asked, translating for him. His job depends on it. The repair cost 8,000 baht. I paid without question. I was building trust, I told myself, building a family. When Somchai hugged me and called me Fee older brother, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. I belonged. That evening, Anong and I sat on our small porch, watching the street vendors set up for the night market. My family never had money, she said quietly. My father worked construction. Mother clean houses. I want different life. I took her hand. We'll build something better together. She smiled and squeezed my fingers. You good man, Leonard. I'm lucky, woman. I believed her. I wanted to believe her more than I'd wanted to believe anything in my life. The first red flag appeared 3 months into our marriage. I came home early from the immigration office to find a man I didn't recognize sitting at our kitchen table. He was younger than Anong, maybe 26, with tattoos covering his arms and a motorcycle helmet beside his chair. This is my cousin Niran, Anong said quickly when she saw my surprise. He need place to stay few days. Job in Pattaya. Niran nodded at me but didn't speak. Not in English, not in Thai. He just stared. How long is few days? I asked Anong later when we were alone in our bedroom. She was brushing her hair in the mirror, avoiding my eyes. Maybe 1 week, 2 week maximum. He good boy, just need help. But weeks passed and Niran remained. He slept on our couch, ate our food, and barely acknowledged my existence. Worse, Anong seemed different around him. They spoke in rapid Thai when they thought I wasn't listening. She laughed at jokes I couldn't understand. When I asked what was funny, she'd wave her hand dismissively. Just silly talk about family. The second red flag was the phone. I noticed it one evening when she came out of the shower, a sleek smartphone I'd never seen before buzzing on the nightstand. New phone? I asked. She picked it up quickly, silencing it. My hotel give me. For work only. But she guarded it like a secret. She'd take it with her to the bathroom, sleep with it under her pillow, never let it out of her sight. When it rang during dinner, she'd excuse herself to the garden to answer. Work problem, she'd explain when she returned. Boss very demanding. Her shifts at the hotel grew longer too. What used to be 9 to 5 became 9 to 9, then 9 to midnight. Tourist season very busy, she'd say when I asked. Everyone must work extra. But when I visited her at the hotel one afternoon to surprise her with lunch, the receptionist looked confused. Kun Anong? She finished work at 4 today. Same as always. I found Anong in the parking lot, getting into a car I didn't recognize. She saw me before I could approach. Leonard, she called, jogging over. What you doing here? My mouth felt dry. I thought. The receptionist said you finished early. Her face went cold for just a moment, a flash of something I'd never seen before. Then the smile returned. I have second job, she said, cleaning office building. I tell you before. Had she told me? I couldn't remember. My mind felt foggy, uncertain. Why didn't you remind me? She stepped closer, her voice softening. Because you worry too much already. You think I cannot take care of myself. That night she was extra affectionate. She cooked my favorite massaman curry, massaged my shoulders, made love to me with an intensity that felt almost desperate. I love you so much, she whispered against my ear. Don't ever doubt that. But doubt had already crept in. I just wasn't ready to face it yet. The first disappearance happened on a Sunday in November. I woke up to find her side of the bed empty and cold. Anong? I called, checking the bathroom, the kitchen, the garden. Nothing. Her motorcycle was gone. Her phone went straight to voicemail. I found Niran in the living room making instant noodles. "Where is she?" I asked. He shrugged without looking up. "Visit mother," he said in broken English. "Mother's sick. Why hadn't she told me? Why hadn't she woken me up?" I tried calling the hotel, but it was her day off. I tried calling the number she'd given me for her mother's house, but it was disconnected. By evening, I was frantic. I drove to every hospital in Pattaya, showing her photo to nurses and security guards. No one had seen her. I contacted the tourist police, but they seemed uninterested. "Girlfriend, go away few days. Come back," the officer said with a bored expression. This normal. But she wasn't just my girlfriend, she was my wife. On Monday, I waited outside her hotel. Her colleagues seemed surprised to see me. "Anong not come to work today," said Mali, another receptionist. "She call in sick." Tuesday was the same. By Wednesday, I was beyond panic. I was imagining car accidents, kidnappings, worse. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I sat by the phone, willing it to ring. Then, Thursday morning, I heard her key in the lock. She walked in like nothing had happened, carrying a bag of fruit and wearing clothes I'd never seen before. "Hello, darling," she said, kissing my cheek. "I miss you." "Where have you been?" My voice came out as a whisper. She looked hurt. "I tell Naran, my mother very sick. I stay with her 3 days." "Your phone was off. I tried calling. Battery die. And you know my village. No good signal." She set down the fruit and took my hands. "Why, you look so worried." "I'm fine. I'm here." "You could have told me. You could have woken me up." Her expression changed then. The hurt look deepened, became something colder. "You think I'm lying?" "No, you think I run away? Leave my husband?" She pulled her hands free. "Leonard, this very hurtful. I thought you trust me." Suddenly, I was the one apologizing. I was the one begging forgiveness for being worried about my missing wife. "I'm sorry," I said, reaching for her. "I was scared. I didn't know what to think." She let me hold her, but her body felt stiff, resistant. In Thailand, when family need help, we go. We don't ask permission. We just go. "I understand. I'm sorry." That night she was warm again, loving. We made love with a passion that felt like reconciliation, like a promise that things would be different. But lying in the dark afterward, listening to her breathe beside me, I couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted. She'd shown me how easily she could disappear, how easily she could make me feel crazy for worrying, and somehow she'd made it my fault. The envelope from Bangkok Bank arrived on a Tuesday in December. I almost threw it away, thinking it was another statement for the account I'd opened for Anong, but something about the weight felt wrong. Inside was a loan confirmation notice, 120,000 baht, approved and disbursed in my name, with my signature. Except I'd never applied for any loan. My hands shook as I read the details. The money had been withdrawn in cash 3 days earlier. The signature looked like mine, but I couldn't remember signing anything. I sat at our kitchen table, staring at the papers, until Anong came home from work. "We need to talk," I said, holding up the envelope. Her face went pale, but only for a second. Then the tears started. "I can explain," she sobbed, collapsing into the chair beside me. "Niran, he take your ID card. I don't know what he do." "He took my ID? When?" "Few weeks ago. I find out yesterday. I was going to tell you." The story tumbled out between her tears. Niran had been in debt to some dangerous people. He'd used my identity to get the loan without telling her. She'd confronted him, demanded he pay it back, but he'd already spent the money on his debts. "I'm so sorry," she cried, clinging to my arm. "I never think he would do this. He's family. I trust him." It sounded plausible. It sounded exactly like something a desperate young man might do. But something nagged at me. Where is he now? Gone. I throw him out yesterday when I find out. He cannot stay here anymore. I wanted to believe her. Part of me needed to believe her. But that night, I went through my wallet, my documents, checking everything. My passport was there, my bank cards, my driver's license. But something felt different. Used. The next morning I called the bank. I'd like to check on all accounts and credit facilities in my name, I told the customer service representative. The list she read back made my stomach drop. 2 credit cards I'd never applied for. A second loan, smaller but still significant, all approved within the past 2 months, all with my signature. I hung up and sat in my car in the bank parking lot trying to breathe. Either I was losing my mind, or someone was systematically destroying my financial life. When I got home, Anong was cooking lunch, humming the same Thai song she always hummed. She looked so innocent, so normal. "How was your morning?" she asked, not turning from the stove. "Fine," I lied. That evening, I confronted her with everything. She cried again. She blamed Niran again. She promised to help me fix everything, to contact the bank, to make it right. "We're in this together," she said, holding my face in her hands. "I love you. I would never hurt you." I wanted to believe her. I was terrified of not believing her. Because if Anong was lying, if she was part of this, then everything I thought I knew about my life was a lie. And I wasn't ready for that truth yet. The morning of our first anniversary, I woke up early to find Anong already dressed and putting on her jewelry. "Where are you going?" I asked, checking the clock. It was barely 7. "Work," she said without looking at me. "Big group checking in today. I'd planned to take her to dinner that evening at the same beachside restaurant where we'd had our first real date. I'd even bought her a gold bracelet, something special to mark the year. "Will you be home by 6? She paused at the mirror, adjusting her earrings. "Maybe. Depend on how busy." There was something different in her voice, something final. But I pushed the feeling away. It was our anniversary. She was probably just nervous about work. "I love you," I called as she headed for the door. She stopped, her hand on the handle, and for a moment I thought she might turn around. "I know," she said quietly. Then she was gone. I spent the day preparing. I cleaned the house, bought flowers, chilled a bottle of wine. At 5 o'clock, I called her phone. It went straight to voicemail. At 6, I called the hotel. "Kun Anong not working today," the receptionist told me. "She'd take holiday for anniversary." "Holiday?" She told me she was working. I tried her phone again. Still nothing. By 8 o'clock, I was worried. By 10, I was panicking. By midnight, I was sitting on our porch in the dark, listening for the sound of her motorcycle. She didn't come home that night, or the next day. By Thursday, I couldn't take it anymore. I drove to the hotel and demanded to speak to her manager. "I'm sorry, sir," the woman said gently. "Anong quit her job 2 weeks ago. She said she was moving away." "Moving away?" We'd never discussed moving. We just renewed our house lease. Did she say where? "No, sir. She just said it was time for new beginning." I drove home in a daze. Our house looked the same from the outside, but something felt wrong the moment I opened the door. It was too quiet, too empty. I walked through each room slowly, cataloging what was missing. Her clothes were gone from our wardrobe. Her jewelry box was empty. The Buddhist statues she'd arranged so carefully in the living room had vanished. My laptop was gone from the desk. The emergency cash I kept in a box under our bed, 300,000 baht, was missing. Even my backup passport and bank documents had been taken from the safe. But the worst part was the silence. The complete absence of her presence, as if she'd never existed at all. I sat on our bed, my bed now, and tried to process what had happened. My wife of exactly 1 year had disappeared. Again. But this time, She'd taken everything of value with her, and somehow I wasn't even surprised. The signs had been there for months. The mysterious cousin who never spoke to me, the second phone she guarded so carefully, the overnight disappearances, the loans in my name that she claimed to know nothing about. I'd seen it all and chosen to ignore it because I was terrified of being alone again, because I needed to believe that someone could love me. The landlady knocked on my door that evening. "Your wife? She gone?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. "Yes." She nodded sadly. "I'm sorry. I see this before. They plan for long time. Pack things slowly so you don't notice. Wait for right moment then." She made a gesture like smoke disappearing. "How long did you know?" I asked. "I suspect maybe 2 months. Her cousin, he asked too many questions about you. About your money, about your routine. 2 months. While I was buying her gifts and planning our future, she was planning her exit. Did you know she quit her job?" "Yes. She tell me last week she moving to Bangkok. New life, she say." I thanked the landlady and closed the door. Then I did something I hadn't done since I was a child. I cried. Not just tears, but deep, wrenching sobs that came from somewhere I didn't know existed. I cried for the year I'd lost, for the money that was gone, for the trust that had been shattered. But mostly, I cried for the man I'd been naive, desperate, willing to ignore every warning sign because I was so afraid of being alone. That man was gone now, and I wasn't sure who would take his place. The Norwegian found me 3 weeks later at Charlie's bar on Walking Street. I was nursing my third beer of the afternoon, watching the tourists laugh and take selfies, wondering how they could be so happy when the world felt so dark. "You look like shit, mate," he said, sliding into the seat across from me. His name was Eric, and I'd met him a few times during my early days in Pattaya. He was older than me, maybe 70, with white hair and kind eyes that had seen too much. "Feel like it too," I said. He gestured to the bartender for 2 more beers. "Want to talk about it?" I found myself telling him everything. The marriage, the disappearances, the money, the final vanishing act. Eric listened without judgment, nodding occasionally, his expression growing sadder with each detail. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "Show me her photo," he said finally. I pulled out my phone, scrolled to a picture of Anong at our wedding. Smiling, radiant, beautiful. Eric studied it carefully, then sighed. "Ah, shit. What? Her name isn't Anong. It's Nim. And you're not the first." The room seemed to tilt around me. "What do you mean?" "My friend Lars. Danish guy, about your age. She married him 2 years ago. Same story, sweet girl. Worked at a hotel. Needed help with her family. Lasted 8 months before she cleaned him out and disappeared." I stared at the photo on my phone. The woman I'd loved, the woman I'd married, the woman who'd destroyed me. How many others? Lars knows of at least 3. Could be more. Eric reached across the table and put his hand on my arm. "I'm sorry, mate. I should have said something when I first saw you two together. But you looked so happy." The pieces were falling into place now. The cousin who never spoke to me, probably her boyfriend or partner in the scheme. The second phone for coordinating with other marks. The job she'd supposedly quit, she'd probably never worked there regularly to begin with. The loans in my name, she'd had months to study my signature, my habits, my weaknesses. She was so good at it, I said, more to myself than to Eric. The tears, the stories about her family, the way she made me feel special. They always are. That's how they survive. I thought about that word, survive, as if what she'd done to me was just another day at the office, another transaction in a business I'd never understood I was part of. "Do you hate her?" Eric asked. I considered the question seriously. Did I hate her? I felt anger, certainly, betrayal, humiliation. But underneath it all was something else, something that scared me more than the anger. "Sometimes I miss her," I admitted. "Even knowing what she did, sometimes I miss her laugh, The way she used to trace circles on my chest at night. The way she made me feel like I mattered. Eric nodded sadly. That's the worst part, isn't it? They don't just take your money. They take your ability to trust your own feelings. We sat in silence after that, two old men drinking beer in a tourist bar, both of us victims of our own desperate need to believe in love. Before I left, Eric gave me a piece of advice that would haunt me for months. Don't go looking for her, he said. Don't try to get revenge or get your money back. That way lies madness. She's already moved on to someone else. You need to do the same. But as I walked home to my empty house that night, I realized something that Eric didn't understand. I wasn't mourning the money she'd taken. I was mourning the version of myself that had been capable of believing in fairy tales, and I wasn't sure that man would ever exist again. I didn't chase her. I didn't file more police reports or hire investigators or post her photo on expat Facebook groups with warnings about her crimes. Instead, I did something that probably seemed crazy to everyone who knew the story. I bought a train ticket to Chiang Mai. I packed one suitcase with clothes and another with the books I'd brought from England but never had time to read. I left my house with 3 months' rent paid and a note for the landlady saying she could keep the deposit. Then I disappeared too. Not like Anong had disappeared, taking everything of value and leaving destruction in my wake. I disappeared like a man who needed to find himself again. I found a small guest house in the old quarter of Chiang Mai, run by a Thai woman in her 60s who asked no questions and expected no explanations. My room was simple: a bed, a desk, a chair, a window that looked out onto a narrow street where vendors sold fruit and noodles from carts. For the first month, I barely spoke to anyone. I woke up early, ate breakfast at the same cafe, walked the same route through the old temples, came back to my room, and read until dark. I was grieving, I realized, not just for the money or the marriage, but for the man I'd been before I met her. The Leonard who could trust his own judgment, the Leonard who could believe in simple human kindness without looking for hidden motives. She'd taken that man along with everything else. In my second month, I started writing. Not letters to family or emails to friends, but just thoughts, memories, trying to trace the path that had led me from Manchester to Pattaya to this small room in northern Thailand. I wrote about my first marriage, the years of slow erosion that had left me feeling invisible in my own home. I wrote about the loneliness after the divorce, the way silence could become a weight that crushed your chest. I wrote about the fantasy I'd created in my mind of what life in Thailand could be: warm weather, cheap living, maybe even love if I was lucky. And I wrote about Anong, not the woman who'd stolen from me, but the woman I'd thought she was. The way she'd listened to my stories about Manchester, about my work as an engineer, about the son who barely called anymore. The way she'd made me feel interesting again, valuable, worth loving. That woman had never existed, but the feelings she'd created in me were real, and those feelings deserved to be mourned. On a rainy afternoon in March, I finally wrote a letter to my son David in Manchester. We hadn't spoken since before the wedding. He'd made his disapproval clear when I'd told him about Anong, the age difference, the cultural gap, the obvious dangers. He'd been right about everything, and I'd been too proud to admit it. I know you warned me, I wrote. I know you saw what I couldn't or wouldn't see. I was so desperate to feel alive again that I ignored every red flag, every moment of doubt, every instinct that told me something was wrong. She took my money, but I gave her something more valuable. I gave her the power to make me doubt everything I thought I knew about myself. I'm working on taking that power back. I mailed the letter on a Thursday. David called me on Saturday. "Dad," he said when I answered the phone. Just that one word, but I could hear forgiveness in it. Relief. "I'm sorry, son. You don't need to apologize. You fell in love. It happens." We talked for an hour. About his job, his girlfriend, the house he was thinking of buying, normal things, family things. When we hung up, I realized I'd gone an entire hour without thinking about Anong once. That felt like progress. 6 months after arriving in Chiang Mai, I was ready to leave, not because I'd healed or moved on or found some profound wisdom that made everything okay, but because I'd learned to live with the knowledge of what I'd lost without letting it define everything I might still become. I'd learned that loneliness and solitude were different things. Loneliness was the ache I'd felt in Manchester, the desperate hunger for connection that had made me vulnerable to someone like her. Solitude was what I'd found in that small room, the peace of being alone with myself without needing to be saved by someone else. I moved back to Pattaya, but to a different part of town. A small apartment near the beach, nothing fancy, but clean and quiet. I didn't avoid the places where Anong and I had been together. I didn't create elaborate routes to avoid the hotel where she'd worked, or the restaurant where we'd had our anniversary dinner. Instead, I let those places become just places again. Buildings and streets and memories that belonged to the past. Some mornings I wake up and think about her, not with anger anymore, but with something closer to understanding. She was a survivor in a world that gave her few options. She'd learned to read desperate old men like me, to give us just enough warmth and affection to make us believe we were special. It was a skill, like any other, and I'd been an easy mark. I don't excuse what she did. I don't romanticize it or pretend it was anything other than theft dressed up as love. But I don't hate her anymore either. Hate takes too much energy, and I need that energy for other things now. Last week, I met a woman at the British Legion. Not a Thai woman, a British expat about my age, who moved here after her husband died. We talked about books, about the weather, about how different life in Thailand was from what we'd expected. When she mentioned she was going to the night market later, I almost asked if she'd like company. Almost. But then I caught myself. Not because I don't trust her, but because I don't trust my reasons for wanting to go. Am I interested in her as a person, or am I just afraid of eating dinner alone again? It's a question I need to be able to answer honestly before I can risk opening my heart to anyone new. Maybe someday I'll be ready for that risk. Maybe I'll meet someone who makes me want to believe in love again. But if I do, it will be as a man who knows the difference between love and need, between partnership and rescue, between sharing a life and losing yourself in someone else's story. Anong taught me those differences, even if that wasn't her intention. She took my money, my trust, and my illusions, but in the end, she gave me something too. She gave me back to myself, and that might be worth more than everything she stole.